Alrighty, so in this video, we are going to get into the foundations and we're going to quickly cover the texts referenced in the Sales Process IO Accelerator and some of my favorite books. And if you're wondering where I got a lot of this stuff, it comes from a ton of personal experience. And then I just read books like crazy. I just like doing it. So I'm going to go through some of the books that I think are really important. And if you want to pick up some of these texts, I definitely recommend it. So let's get into it. The first book is a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank. Now, this is a great book because Steve breaks down the process of customer development. And he does an amazing job. His whole thing is getting out of the building and getting tons of references and data before you start building your product. And he's kind of the guy that says, you should never be building things before you sell it. And it's a really dense read. He's a great author. He's a super smart guy. He's richer than God right now. And I definitely recommend that book for if you're starting. Even if you're not starting, I recommend it because it'll help you in the customer development process. Another great book, The Lean Startup. Now, Eric got a lot of his stuff from Steve, and Eric just tells a few different stories and explains the way that he built this interesting business. And I definitely recommend going through The Lean Startup. Clayton Christensen has some great text, The Innovator's Dilemma and Solution. He explains how to enter new markets and kind of how these businesses are experiencing and handling competition as they travel through time. It's a really great, it's a great book. Russell Brunson, he has some great stuff out there. He has programs out there. He has books out there. Russell is just an amazing video sales letter guy, webinar guy, selling to the masses type of guy. And his video sales letter and webinar stuff is great. Peter Thiel, another book, 0 to 1. I'm sure everyone have already read this. He's like a billionaire venture capitalist investor in Facebook. And he wrote this book called 0 to 1, and he explains this niche theory really, 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 really well, starting with one particular niche and then expanding in concentric circles. That's really, really key. And his whole thing is competition is for losers. And I agree 100% with that. Aaron Ross has some great books. Predictable Revenue, Impossible to Inevitable. They're a little bit older. They're a little bit outdated, but his principles are sound. He uses outbound prospecting to build predictable sales machines, and we cover a lot of outbound prospecting in this program. So definitely recommend picking up some of Aaron's books and just skimming through those. Another great read. Now, you might not think that it's very educational, but The Wolf of Wall Street, and not only The Wolf of Wall Street, but the sequel, Catching the Wolf of Wall Street by Jordan Belfort. If you ever read any of these books, you probably have seen the movie. It's really entertaining, and he's a really funny guy, and he's a great author, and it's fun to read his stuff, but it's also really educational, like especially in the sequel, Catching the Wolf of Wall Street, when he's going through this whole he goes through the whole background story in depth of how he built his business and how he was able to recruit and train and generate leads and get these people so motivated, and kind of how the business works. Now, obviously, you don't want to copy this guy because he got into some trouble, he got into some hot water. But some of the stuff that he it explains is really eye-opening, and it's not only eye-opening, but it's also entertaining. Another great book by Eugene Schwartz, it's called Breakthrough Advertising. Now, this is a fantastic book on copywriting and advertising. He explains the foundations, the fundamentals. We'll do a little interlude in this program with Eugene Schwartz, and he explains the messaging is dependent on the sophistication of the market and the market in time. So this is really, really important. So the messaging will change as the market starts to evolve and starts to mature. And it's a very interesting read, and it's like $300. I think the book is out of print. If you can find a copy, I definitely recommend picking it up. Another great reference, David Ogilvy, Confessions of an Advertising Man. David Ogilvy has some great stuff. I reference a lot of his long form copywriting stuff in my advertising training. Dr. David Buss, a book called Evolutionary Psychology. Now, Evolutionary Psychology is my favorite book of all time because it covers so much. It basically explains to me the meaning of life. And when I read this while I was on vacation in Mexico one year, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was, it's a fantastic book. I think he's at the University of Texas. He's at the top of his field. And this book just explains how living things operate. And of course, this information will help you come up with messaging, come up with products, and just kind of gives you a great perspective. Another great book, The 80-20 Principle, just on managing time and managing resources, is a great book. You probably already read it. This book here, Words That Sell, is great for copywriting. It just gives you the adjectives that you need to use when you're writing really compelling copy. And I use this as a reference when I'm writing copy sometimes. Another great book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. Now this is all about focus. And so if you have it's a really great book on just getting stuff done and really simplifying what you're trying to do into a few things. And obviously you want to just do one. His whole thesis is just do one thing at a time, because people are really bad at multitasking. Multitasking is not even a thing. You want to do one thing really well at a time. And so that book really explains that principle really well. Another great book, The Lessons of History, the Will and Ariel Durant. They wrote some books, The Lessons of History and the Greatest Minds and Ideas of All Time. This book is fantastic because it just puts a lot of these things in perspective. And as Ray Dalio would say it's just a lot of what we're doing is just another one of those. And so if you're into history and this interests you, I definitely recommend this book, because it just shows you what we're doing is not too new. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business or whatever, what we're doing is not too new. When things happen in the market, it's just another one of those. And The Lessons of History is a great book to put things in perspective. If you're raising venture capital, I recommend reading this book called Venture Deals. Okay, it's a really solid book. It'll help you with. It's a pretty technical book, but it'll help you with your pricing and all that stuff when you're pitching. I reference The Sales Acceleration Formula. This is a pretty solid book. Robert Greene Mastery, Getting Really, Really Good at Something. I recommend reading that book. It is awesome. The Entrepreneurial Bible to Venture Capital, The Inside Secrets. Another great book if you are raising venture capital. Another great influence that I had was one of my mentors was a guy named Ben Stewart when I was in my early 20s. He was making millions of dollars when he was in his 30s. And I saw how this guy ran a business. I saw it firsthand because I was under his wing. And I was like, why isn't everyone else doing this? I didn't understand. Everyone else was, fretting over $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 a year, and Ben was making $50,000 a day. I was just like, why isn't everyone doing this? So I got a lot of my stuff from Ben Stewart. Just how he operates and how he thinks, and that is reflected in the program. Another great book on copywriting is a book called Contagious. This is how things catch on. It's a really interesting book. Obviously, this book is one of my favorites on writing well. So just if you're not a professional writer, or you're not comfortable with copywriting, you're not even comfortable with writing, I just recommend picking up this book. It's like $9. Crush through it, take some notes. It'll help you a ton with your copywriting. And then Dan Kennedy, The Ultimate Sales Letter. This is a great book. I recommend picking that up as well, because that'll help you with the copywriting. Okay, so those are the text reference. And thank you for paying attention. We will see you in the next video.